Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the cryptoverse. The discussion with Elon Musk, Catherine Wood, and Jack Dorsey just ended, part of the B Word conference. I thought it was an interesting discussion, but I watched all of it, and I wanted to just give my updates. And in case you missed it, this way you can kind of get caught up on more or less what happened. So generally, they were talking about, what do you see for the future of Bitcoin? What are sort of some of its limitations? And then also, people, some of them sort of gave their own input on some things that were not necessarily asked. But some of the key things, I think, are that Elon said that we know Tesla has Bitcoin on its balance sheet, but he also said that SpaceX, which is a private company, also holds Bitcoin on the balance sheet. Now, this is news to me. I've never heard of that. So if it was disclosed before, I completely missed it. But I'm pretty sure that is news that SpaceX also has Bitcoin on the balance sheet. Elon Musk also said he owns Bitcoin, which I think he said before, but he also said he owns Ethereum and Doge. Now, it comes as no surprise that he owns Doge because he's pumping it quite frequently on Twitter, which reminds me of a quote that he said during the interview or during the discussion. He says, "I might pump, but I don't dump." So hopefully he's trying to, distill any fears that he's just constantly pumping a coin just to sell it later. So he says he doesn't dump. As far as we know, the only Bitcoin that Tesla has sold is the 10% that they said they sold several months ago. Other than that, I don't think they disclosed of selling anything. And it just sounds like Elon also said he owns a lot more Bitcoin by far than Doge and Ethereum. He also said that he likes DeFi. Okay, so he also said he likes DeFi, which comes as no surprise considering he owns Ethereum. I mean, if you're owning Ethereum, you're probably buying somewhat into the narrative of DeFi as it is one of the main use cases of it. So to recap quickly those few points, Elon says he owns Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Doge. The whole Doge thing is sort of beyond me. Maybe if it dumps enough, I'll have to consider it just so I'm not so butthurt anytime some billionaire pumps it. But Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Doge are the three that Elon says he owns. And then he said Tesla and SpaceX also have Bitcoin on the balance sheet. I also thought it was funny because anytime Elon would say something good about Bitcoin, it's like the price would go up 1%. Anytime he would say something bad about it, it seemed like the price would go down 1%. So there definitely was some volatility there. But the price of Bitcoin right now is still shy of $32,000. So we'll see what ultimately comes of this, if anything, right? If we're able to break the downtrend or if we continue on in the downtrend. One thing that was interesting that Elon went on about for a little while, which actually we've heard him say before in another interview you can find on YouTube, in which he was on some street with some camera in his face asking him, about crypto and whatnot. He said that, with regards to crypto, he said his philosophy is the most entertaining option is the most likely outcome, right? The most likely outcome is the most entertaining one. And he thinks, obviously, that Dogecoin would be the most entertaining outcome that could propel it to number one. When Jack was asked what he thought about Doge going to number one, he sort of just said, for a little while. So I don't think they necessarily see eye to eye there, but it was interesting because, Elon, I know he's sort of seen as not super supportive of Bitcoin over the last few months, but I guess if you think about it, Tesla, they bought $1.5 billion worth of Bitcoin, okay? They sold 10%, and then they stopped accepting it as payment. And he said that the reason why they did that is because, Tesla's main mission is renewable energy and whatnot. And he said that after Tesla bought Bitcoin, it led it, to a huge increase in the price of Bitcoin, and the energy being used to mine it was not renewable. But he also went on to say that, it seems like things are heading in the right direction and that he thinks, more likely than not, that Tesla will accept Bitcoin again in the future, but they would like more time to do their due diligence on it. So that is at least some positive news for the Bitcoin community. to know that, okay, well, they probably will accept Tesla, or they probably will accept Bitcoin in the future. I also thought it was interesting too, and I think it's a valid point by Elon. A lot of people give him flack for for Tesla not accepting Bitcoin anymore. But it's like, well, what about all these other major companies? Like, why are they not accepting Bitcoin? Like, why is Twitter not accepting Bitcoin? Jack obviously is a big proponent of Bitcoin. And so Elon pressed Jack. He's like, well, will Twitter accept Bitcoin as payment? And he didn't really give a decisive answer on that. That probably would have been too good for just an off the cuff question. But he did say that Twitter is hoping to not be reliant on advertising revenue in order to ultimately be successful. But it does still beg the question, well, obviously Twitter does have advertisers. Should they be allowed to pay for those ads in Bitcoin? So that was an interesting question. I was actually kind of hoping someone would ask a question to Jack, considering he was right there, and we know he's a Bitcoin bull. Like, why isn't this the case already? So those are a few different questions, I think, that were somewhat interesting. So he did say that Tesla would resume it. They did ask, or Elon did say that as long as there's a conscious, determined, and real effort by the Bitcoin mining community to move towards renewables, then Tesla can support that. So it sounds like to me that Elon is he's obviously big into renewable energy. He went on to say that they're also very involved with wind and solar. Obviously, Tesla being a big proponent of renewable energy. He also did say that modern nuclear reactors are better. They're safer than the general community thinks they are. And I agree with this. I mean, you might not know it, but I do have a PhD in nuclear engineering, and this is one of the biggest misconceptions I think about nuclear is that it's unsafe and that it can't be trusted and whatnot. When in reality, it is actually one of the safest forms of energy, in my opinion. I mean, yes, there have been accidents from nuclear stuff, but if you think about all the people that say die in coal plants each year, it doesn't even come close, right? It doesn't even come close. And we've made a ton of strides in nuclear energy over the last several decades. Now, of course, fusion is always, or I should say sustainable fusion is always, or let me say a commercial viable fusion reactor is always 20 years away, as my professors back from grad school would always say and joke about that even when they went to grad school, maybe back in like the 70s or whatnot, it was always, the joke was that it's always 20 years away. And I don't really see that has necessarily changed that much recently. But he was talking about fission, and he did clarify that he was talking about fission, not fusion. So I think there were a lot of interesting points. They also discussed Catherine Wood was there. She obviously is the CEO of ARK Invest. And they discussed the idea of more institutions getting Bitcoin onto their balance sheet. And ways to successfully navigate that. But I do think that there are a lot of interesting points made. Elon made it clear that he's not trying to be the big Bitcoin villain. He made it clear that he owns Bitcoin, that he is not if he was only motivated by financial means, then he would not be doing this, because obviously by saying these things, it's probably having some effect on the price of Bitcoin. And if he owns a lot of it, then that negatively affects his wealth. At the same time, being a multi-billionaire and one of and having so much wealth, I mean, you could also argue that it moves like that are probably just a rounding error in terms of what his wealth is. So to say that's the reason, I don't know, take it or leave it. But I do think he was trying to put out a good show for the Bitcoin community and say, look, guys, we want Bitcoin to be more focused on renewable energy, which I feel like a lot of people have come out and tried to prove that it is. And then, I feel like the narrative's sort of playing out, right? Like, okay, they accept Bitcoin, then, the price of Bitcoin goes up, the hash rate goes sky high, then it calls into question renewable energy, which is what Tesla stands for. Therefore, they stopped accepting Bitcoin. Now we have to come full circle, go through the fact that, okay, well, it is renewable energy, and then someday they will start accepting Bitcoin again, and then maybe, we can continue to move on from there, and we'll come full circle. That is sort of what I think. My guess is that Tesla will eventually accept Bitcoin again, but more importantly, I think that, Tesla accepting Bitcoin again is great, but it also still begs the question, well, when are other places, when are other major institutions going to start accepting Bitcoin and start holding it on their balance sheet? As we've always said, right, institutions going to take time for them to come on. Don't expect them all to FOMO in 2021 and for us to just, disappear for 2022 to just come back in 2024 and rinse and repeat. It's going to take time, and it's going to take lots of time. So, some of those things haven't changed. I think those were the main points that I wanted to discuss. Obviously, it was a fairly long talk, about an hour and a half, but I just wanted to highlight some of the main points that I thought were interesting, and hopefully you guys found them interesting too. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up. Also, check out the Telegram channel, which you can find a link to in the description below. We are having a sale on the premium list. You can find a link to that in the description below as well. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe, click the bell icon to turn on notifications, and I will see you next time. Bye.